What's up guys? Hope everyone is doing super well and welcome to today's exciting video tutorial on how to authenticate a user using the Google sign-in method. Now, if you guys have seen this before, you probably know that it really facilitates that login and sign up process because instead of having to fill out these login fields or these sign up fields, all the user has to do is hit this sign in with Google button. It authenticates the user using their Google account and then takes them to the main user interface of the application. So that's what we're going to be learning how to implement in this video today. Quick note before we get started. This is going to be building off of an existing project that I did a couple weeks ago and made a video tutorial for. And that was how to authenticate and create a user using Firebase with just their email and password. So that's what the current application looks like right now that you guys might have. If you don't have it, go ahead and download the source code. The link for that is in the description. And if you want to check out the video tutorial and learn how to get Firebase added to your project and configure that email sign-in and sign-up method, check out the video tutorial, which is in the description as well. Now, you guys should be able to just download the source code and the Firebase stuff will already be configured, and you'll be able to follow along with us and just add the Google sign-in to that existing project. But if you want this to work for like your own personal or own custom project, then you're going to need to add Firebase to your own project, create your own backend using the Firebase SDK and all that stuff. And all that's covered in the initial video tutorial. So if you guys want to check that out, the link's in the description. Now, let's go ahead and get started with a quick demo of the application so we can see what we're going to be doing and how this stuff works. All right guys, so let's really quickly take a look at our completed application, and then this is what our backend is going to look like in Firebase. This is our database and it has some information about each one of our users, and then this is our authentication section where we can see our users like email and how they signed up and some of that cool stuff. So we see this sign in with Google button here, and when we hit that button it's going to ask us if we want to sign in with Google. We hit continue. And this is as if we've never signed up for this app before. So this would be like the sign up process. It asks us to select a Google account. So I'm going to hit mine here. So once I do that, it dismisses that login page, presents me with the main user interface of the application, meaning that I have now logged in or signed up. And then it gives me this like welcome message here with my full name. And what's interesting about this is we're actually going to be able to extract that data from the Google account that the user signed in with using some data from that authentication token that we get back from the Google sign-in method. So if I were to refresh this page now, we will see that this provider or how I signed up has been through Google, and that's my email address right there. And then if I go to my database, we'll see, let's see, this is the node that was added, or the information that was added to the database. It has my email and my username, which is what we see there. Don't worry about this account type. That's like for a different feature I implemented in the completed app. We're not going to be working with that. What's important to understand is that we're adding information to our database and adding a user to our Firebase database through signing them up with Google. So that's what we're going to get started with now in Xcode. So let's go ahead and jump into that. All right guys, so let's go ahead and hop into Xcode, and you guys should have downloaded the completed source code for this project by now. And what it's going to give you is just this like base level project that we have here without any of this Google sign-in functionality. So what we're going to do first is set up our UI. So we're going to add in this divider view and then our sign in with Google button. And we're going to do the same thing on our sign up page. And I'm going to just be copy and pasting that code, guys, because it saves time and I don't have to sit here and type out all of this like code to add in these view components. So go into your login controller and your property section and find that login button, and we're just going to go below that and paste in these two things. First is this divider view. So this is all the code to set up this divider view with this label and these two separators here. That's what that does. And then here's the code for our Google login button. We're also going to need to add in this color, Google Red. You guys don't have that right now. So let's go ahead and jump into that. Go to your extensions file and just go ahead and add that code in right there. That gives us back the color for that Google login button. And these are actually the red, green, blue values provided to us by Google. So that color is exact. So let's hop back into our login controller, and now we need to create this handle Google sign-in action handler for our button. So just copy and paste that. Go to our selectors section and say at Objective-C func and handle Google sign-in. And for now, I'll just say print handle Google sign-in. And now we need to just add these subviews to our view. So again, I'm just going to copy and paste the code for that. You guys just follow along with me. And all of this code, guys, will be in the source code that you get for this completed project here. So make sure you download both so that this process is a little easier for you. Or if you want, you could pause the video on all this and type the code out yourself. So to add this stuff in, just go below our login button and add this code here, the view add subview divider view, view.add subview Google login button, and then we're going to anchor those two things using that custom function we made in the first video, which was right here, that we use to programmatically add constraints to our subviews when we are adding them to our main view. So now that we have that, let's go ahead and run our project and see if this stuff is working. And then we're just going to add those things to our sign up controller as well. And this is looking really good. So that's all looking nice. And if we hit this, we should see that message printing to our console, handle Google sign in. So that was, where did we put, yeah, this guy right here. It's hitting our button handler correctly. So that's all looking good. Now let's just do the same thing for our sign up controller, and that will be it for our UI. So let's just go ahead and copy and paste all this stuff here. So that divider view and your Google login button, go to your sign up controller, put it in the same spot. Doesn't really matter where you put it. I just kind of like to keep everything in order. So now let's create that button handler as well. So go here, copy and paste that. Oops. Copy and paste. And then back here and grab these two guys again and put them in our sign up controller right below our login button. And let's run that. And that should be good to go as well. Okay, so we see that there, and we see that there as well. So that's all looking really good, guys. That's it for our user interface. Now we're gonna get into actually what we need to do to start adding the functionality to use Google Sign-In. So let's get started with that now. Okay, guys, so what we need to do to start out is go to our terminal and add in a CocoaPod for the Google Sign-In. So we're going to open up our terminal. Just hit Command Space and then type in terminal in your Spotlight. And what we need to do is get into our project directory here. So mine is called Create Firebase User, and I know where it's located, but if you guys don't know where your project's located, just right click on your project name up here, hit Show in Finder, and then just right click on that and hit Get Info, and it will show you where exactly you are. So I'm in desktop, and then Create Firebase User. So let's go ahead and go into our terminal, and what you're going to do is say CD and that first project name that you, or the first folder name that you have to go into. So mine is desktop, and I have to go into another folder I have called desktop. And then we can hit LS and hit enter, and it will show you all the things that you have in that directory. So I need this Create Firebase User guy. I see it right here. You can just go ahead and copy that, and then go back down and say CD, and then just paste that in there. And now I'm inside the directory of my project. So I'm going to say LS one more time. These are all the files that I have in my project directory. We're going to want to open up this pod file. So just say open pod file. That's how you navigate to your pod file from your terminal. You could have done the same thing in just through Finder. But now what we need to do is add a pod. So just go here and say pod single quote Google sign in, and make sure you save your pod file. Make sure you add your ending quote there, and then we're going to go back to our terminal, and we're just going to say pod install. So we see that it's installing this Google sign-in pod, and now it's done. You should see your the name of your MacBook or whatever it's called there once it's done, and this should not have a dot inside it. That means we're done. And now we can go into our project and hop into these pods, and we can go here and see that we now have this Google sign-in pod. So this contains all the code that we need to make this Google sign-in stuff work. So now that we've done that, I want to hop over to Safari. We can get out of this. And we need to look at the documentation that Google gives us, right? To take us through the process of how to implement this Google sign-in method. So you guys just go to this URL here. I'm going to put this URL in the description as well, firebase.google.com/docs/auth/ios/google-signin. So that's the URL for that. Again, the link for that is in the description. So now that we have imported this pod, we need to import them in the correct places. So what we're going to do is hop over. We can get out of this. So let's go back to our main project directory. And we're going to want to implement this pod in 2 different places, or actually 3 different places. We need to start with our app delegate. So go to your app delegate file, and you're going to say import Google sign-in. And you should be able to now import that module now that we've implemented the CocoaPod. So let's go back here. Implement Google sign-in. So we need to do something in our projects, this URL type section of our project. So it says open your project configuration, double click the project name in the left tree view, select your app from the target selection, select the info tab, and expand the URL type section. So we're going to go here and go to this info tab up here. So you should start out in the general tab, go over to this info tab. Then we're going to click on this URL types guy. And it's going to tell us that we need to go into our Google service-info.plist file and look for the reversed client ID key. So our Google service info plist is right here. Then we are going to find this reversed client ID value and just double click on that and copy it. So now we're going to hop back here, go to our URL types, hit add, go into this URL schemes guy, and just paste in that reversed client ID string that we get back. When completed, your config should look something like this, which is exactly what we have. So that's all looking good, guys. Okay, now that we've done that, this is the step that I was getting started with. Declare the app delegate implements the GID sign-in delegate protocol. Okay, so we're not going to be doing this stuff here, and I'll explain why. Actually, no, we need to do this line of code, but I'm going to explain why we're not going to be using this line of code a little bit later on in the project. So what we want to do is implement this line of code here. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy that, go into our app delegate, and below this Firebase app.configure, just go ahead and paste that line of code in there. And let's hit Command B to build our project to make sure everything is still working smoothly. And we get build succeeded, so we're looking good. Now we need to implement this guy here, this function, right? So just go ahead and copy and paste this stuff. And this needs to be implemented in our app delegate as well. So just go down here. Below this did finish launching with options function, which is where you should have put that gid.sharedinstance.clientID guy, and paste that in there. And let's build our project again. That should work. Let's see what's going on. Fix. Okay, so it's just a quick fix there. And just do that here as well. So they need to update their documentation actually for the new Swift. But that's looking good now, guys. Let's just go ahead and build our project. And what this function does is allow us to open a URL. So like when I hit that sign in with Google method, it opened up like a web view, which was a specific URL that contained information about my sign in with Google stuff and presented that on our application. So this function here is going to help us do that, and the URL that it needs to open is this URL scheme that we added in here. So that will take us to like our Google account in our application. That's what is going on there. Don't worry about this stuff. This is if your app runs iOS 8 and older, and that's basically archaic, so we're not going to worry about that. And now let's go ahead and get started with our login and sign up controller and talk about why we didn't implement this stuff in our app delegate and why we're going to be implementing that in our login controller instead. So let's get started with that. All right, guys, so we skipped step 5. We're going to be coming back to that in a little bit. Let's hop down to step 6 and 7 here. So we're going to go to our login controller and we're going to conform to this GID sign in UI delegate. And then we're going to set some of these values here. So let's go to our login controller, conform to this protocol, GID sign. Oops, we need to import Google sign-in. And then we want to conform to the GID sign-in UI delegate protocol. And then we need to set this delegate down here. We're going to not do this in view.load. We're going to set this in view will appear, and I'll explain why later on in the video. So just go ahead and start typing out view will appear, super.animated, or sorry, super.view will appear animated. And we're going to say GID sign-in dot shared instance dot UI delegate equals self. So this UI delegate, I'm pretty sure it's for that presentation logic for when the app presents you with that web view to ask you which Google account that you want to use to sign in. So that's what that delegate is doing right there. And we are going to go back to step 5 really quick, and we're going to implement this sign-in function in our login controller. So we need to conform to another protocol, this GID sign-in delegate protocol, to handle the sign-in process by defining the following methods. So let's go ahead and go down here at the bottom of our login controller, and we're going to say extension login controller GID sign-in delegate, and make sure it's sign-in delegate down here and not sign-in UI delegate like it was up at the top. Let's open this up. And it's going to ask us to implement this sign-in function here. So this is the only function that's actually required. So essentially what's going to happen is this method is going to get called when we ask our app to sign in with Google, or it finishes that process. So now what we got to do is go up here, and in our handle Google sign-in handler, action handler for that button, we're going to execute this line of code that attempts to sign the user in with Google. So we're going to say GID sign-in dot shared instance dot sign in. It's that simple. And we need to add one more line here. We've set this UI delegate to self. Now we need to set the delegate for this GID sign-in delegate to be our login controller as well. So we're going to say GID sign-in dot shared instance dot delegate equals self, so that when the protocol function actually tries to execute, it will work because we've set that delegate. We've told it to delegate that action to our login controller. So for now, we're going to go here and we're just going to say print did sign in with Google. So let's go ahead and run our application really quickly and see if this is working. So we see it coming up here. That's it, sign in with Google. Oh, really quick, I gotta delete my app really quickly, guys. Give me 1 second. Create Firebase user, where are you? Right here. That's because I signed in with it already. And in order to show you guys this stuff working, I have to delete the app and run it through for the first time again. So we hit this. And now we get this message, create Firebase user wants to use google.com to sign in. We hit continue. It gives us that web view that we want, asking which account we want it to use. We hit that and it dismissed that, and now we see this message coming up, did sign in with Google in our console here. You guys see that at the bottom, which is exactly what we typed in our sign in our protocol method here. So whatever code we write here is going to be the code we want to execute when we want to sign our user in. And we're going to write that code in this method now. And before we do that, let's hop over to our sign up controller and just implement the same stuff. So we want to conform to that GID sign in UI delegate protocol. And let's go to our action handler. And we're just going to say GID sign in dot shared instance dot sign in. And here in our view did load method, and we're going to do this in our view did load method, not our view will appear method, and I will explain why. We need to set the UI delegate. So we need to say GID sign in dot shared instance sign in dot shared instance dot UI delegate equals set. So again, guys, the UI delegate is for that presentation logic that we get, or for the action of presenting that view controller to ask us to choose our account. So that's why we need to set this delegate, because we want to have that functionality from our sign up controller as well. But we don't have to implement that protocol method down at the bottom, because we did that already in our login controller. So when we call that sign in function through this like shared instance, it's going to execute that function in our login controller. So that's what we're going to be doing moving forward, guys. Let's go ahead and see if we can get this stuff to work. All right, guys, so we're going to be looking at this sign in function here that we have in our login controller, where we conform to this GID sign in delegate protocol. And the code we're going to be writing here is going to take us to our main user interface. It's going to actually handle the login functionality, and then it's going to do some stuff in the back end as well. So let's take a look at that really quickly. If we go to Firebase, we have this user structure, and this structure needs to be updated with some information about the user when we sign that user in through Google. And then if you guys are following along with me and have your own Firebase project configured, hop into this authentication section in the console, go to sign in method, and then make sure Google is enabled. To enable it, just hit this guy here and make sure it's enabled there. So now let's hop back in here and get started with the code. So we're going to say if let error equals error. We're going to print failed to sign in with error, and then just say return. So this handles our error right here. And then let's go back and look at the documentation really quickly. This is the code we're writing to actually sign our user in. We need to create these two parameters here, this authentication guy and then this credential, which we create through use of this authentication parameter. So let's go ahead and get that done now. We're going to see how that's used. So we're going to say guard let authentication equal user.authentication else return. And if we click on this user guy, we notice that we have access to that user through one of the input parameters of this function, and it's a GID Google user. So this user gets created once Google does its thing in the back end, and it recognizes that you have a Google account, and then we have access to that user through use of this parameter here that allows us to create this authentication parameter. Now we're going to create the credential to log the user in to our app. So we're going to say let credential equal Google auth provider dot credential. And look down here, it says creates an FIR auth credential for a Google sign-in. So it's essentially just creating a Firebase authentication login credential so that we can sign our user in. And Firebase recognizes that it's coming from Google. So we're going to say credential, and this ID token, we're going to use this authentication guy and say authentication dot ID token, and the access token is going to be authentication dot access token. Pretty simple. And now we need to use a Firebase method to sign our user in with this login credential. So we're going to say auth.auth with parentheses dot sign in and retrieve data. So it says asynchronously signs into Firebase with the given third-party credential. Example, Facebook login access token, a Google ID token access token pair, blah, blah, blah. So this is the method we're going to want to use. And then we pass in this credential here. And on this completion block, we're going to hit enter and just say result and error. And let's go ahead and handle our error really quickly. So just go ahead and copy and paste the code we have here. And we're going to say failed to sign in and retrieve data. so we know that our errors are different, or where it's hitting the error. And then let's do some other things really quick. So we need to get the user ID. This is the code we need to write to actually update our database. So we're going to need this user ID, and then we're going to need the email and the username. So in order to do that, we're going to say guard uid equal result.user.uid else return. So this gives us that user ID that we need. Then we're going to say guard email equal result.user.email else return. That gives us back the user's email, obviously. And then guard let username equal result.user. And this is going to be called display name. So that's the actual name of our user. It's not technically a username like Batman or Joker or whatever, but it's just their full name. But we can call it username, it doesn't really matter. And now we're going to create the dictionary to upload to our database, and it's just going to contain this email and username value. So it's going to look like this. We're going to say let values equal email, and then pass in that email parameter, and then username. And then we are just going to say user ref. Oh, I don't think we have that user ref. So let's go ahead and say database.database.reference.child users. So that takes us to this node here. And then we're going to say .child UID .update child values. And we want to use this completion block here. We pass in the values there, hit enter on our completion block, say error ref. And let's type out this code here. So this is going to be really similar to what we have up here. So this is the function we have to log our user in. We just need to grab all of this code here and place that in that completion block. So our root controller is a navigation controller, and it has that home controller embedded in it. So we have to get access to that. And then we call this configure view components function. And I forgot to put this in the initial video, but then we're going to call this function that we have in our home controller to load our user data. And then we are going to dismiss that login controller. So now that we have that all written out, guys, we have to say else return. That's going to be pretty much it for this Google sign-in. Let's go ahead and run our code and see if this works. So we're going to hit sign in with Google, and we notice that it just logs us in, and it says welcome Stephan Dowless. And if we go into our database, this is me right here. So we get my email and then my full name. So that's pretty cool. That's it for the Google sign-in. And let's go ahead and see if it works in our sign up controller as well. That's the complete of that. Okay, so actually really quick, let's run the app again and see if it keeps our user logged in. So it should open up to that main page, and it does, which is super nice. And we have code written for that in our home controller. For those of you guys who never saw the original video, we have this function here called Authenticate User and Configure View. And so when the app loads, it checks to see if our user's logged in, and if they're not, it then presents us with that login controller. And if the user is logged in, or we get a current user back, aka the current user is not nil, then we configure our view components and call this function loads user data, which goes into our database and gets the user's username and loads it onto the screen. So pretty simple. Now let's log out really quickly. And if I run our application after we log out, we're going to notice that we get presented with our login controller just like that. Then I can hit sign up, and let me hit sign in with Google. And it does the same exact thing that the login controller did, which is what you want in your application, because say that your user has forgotten that they have registered for your app before, like they deleted it or something, and they go here and they hit sign up with Google or sign in with Google, doesn't matter. They'll just get automatically logged in and won't have to go through this process. and they can do the same thing on this login page, and it has the same functionality there. So that's it for this video, guys. I hope you guys liked it. If you have any questions or feedback, leave it in the comments section. Hit subscribe if you like this video, and thanks for watching. Peace.